Welcome, guys. Coach Barrick here, Equity Podcast. A few months ago, I asked for, hey, what are some things that you wish you knew before you started the gym? And a bunch of people sent me some stuff, and I'm really appreciative, really appreciate what they did. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go through and answer some of these from start to bottom. I haven't really prepped that much for these, and we're just going to kind of do it. All right, first one here is from Becca. Is how to deal with calluses. So I'm going to start with just like a quick, hey, here's the base, and then I'm going to give you some information on where you should go from there. So the first one is we want to manage the height of the callus, right? And how we do that is a callus shaver, or also known as a corn shaver, I believe. I don't know if shaver's the right word, but callus shaver, if you just Google that, it'll come up. Some way to mitigate that. There's other, they have grater type things. I'm not a big fan of those, but some people really like them. A pumice stone will not remove enough material. That's more just to make your hands nice and smooth. You need something that actually removes some skin. And callus shaver is probably going to be the best way to do that. So that's the first step, is make sure that we're keeping those calluses relatively low. And the reason is, if they build in height, there's more room for friction to remove a callus. And when we see callus removal, generally speaking, it's from a couple things. One is we're working out and we just have a lot of friction, and it eventually just comes off. Also, when we're doing a workout and we're sweating a lot, what happens is that skin softens from all of all the sweat. The skin gets soft, and now it's easier to pull off. So now you have that bar, deadlifts or cleans or pull-ups, and then soft skin plus friction, we're going to pull that callus off. So we want to make sure that we keep them nice and low. If there's less surface area there's less room for that bar to pull it off. So that's the first thing, is managing the height. The second one is care. We want to make sure our hands are healthy and make sure that we're taking care of them. And the big thing is hydration. We want to make sure that our hands are hydrated. If they're super dry, that callus is going to come off easier, right? Dry skin flakes off. If that callus is super dry, it's just going to pop right off. So we want to make sure that our hands stay hydrated. The best time to do that is at night before you go to bed. Get a high quality lotion, rub that in, and then leave it in overnight. We're not using our hands at night, so that lotion has a time to absorb. If we do it during the day, which isn't a terrible thing, you can still lotion your hands during the day, but we're generally doing stuff, and that lotion will rub off on other things when at night, you're not doing anything. So it really has a chance to get in there and really absorb into it. So keeping your hands hydrated is really going to help prevent that the calluses from pulling off. And the next one is we just have to use our hands in two parts. One is use your hands, deadlift. Sometimes don't use grips for pull-ups. Use your hands, and you learn on the other side of that is learn how to use them properly. Make sure we're setting up, we're grabbing the bar properly on the barbell or the pull-up bar or the kettlebell swing or whatever it is. Make sure on the rings, make sure our grip is in a proper position. If we're holding things wrong and we're getting excessive rotation on that implement, there's more friction, there's a higher chance of pulling off. So those are the big three. If I just had to give somebody, a short little brief, that's the big three. Manage your height of your calluses, lotion them at night, and then use your hands properly. If you want to get a little deeper dive into that, I have two things for you. A long time ago, 2014, I think it was, I did a post called 5 Tips for Bulletproof Hands. It's awesome. It's really good. That is what I use, and I tear very, very rarely. So check that out. I did an update on that. I think it might have been this year, actually. I did an update where I think I added a 6th thing, and I'll share both of those in the show notes if you want to check those out and dig a little deeper into like really deep dive on on maintaining your hands. So that's how to deal with calluses. They're going to happen if you work out, and that's okay. Embrace it. Thank you, Becca. Our next one is from Jackie, and it is when to use a belt. That's a very vague question, and I need to kind of narrow it in, or we can talk about this for a really long time. So the first thing I'm going to say is what we're going to start with. We're assuming that you're already using a belt. There are people that don't necessarily need one, but let's say you're on the first thing is like, let's say we're getting ready to, I've never used a belt before. When you start like moving some real weight, and that's a relative for you, if you start moving some real weight compared to what you do, or if you want to kind of see what you're capable of, you might want to start thinking about using a belt. The reason and like how we use a belt, you need to learn like there's a way to use a belt and a way not to use a belt. There's also the reason why we use a belt at all. Like why do people even use it in the first place? Like that's how we could take that question, but I want to take it a different way. And the reason is I answer all of those questions in another video. I talk about how and why we use a belt, like specifically, like this is what we're doing. The short answer is we're trying to increase the pressure in our abdomen. The more pressure, the more abdominal pressure we can create. You can hear my voice changing because I'm trying to do it. The more pressure we can get, that's going to help support our spine, and we'll be able to lift more weight. That's the short version of it. But I have a video, again, I'll have that in the show notes that you can check it out, and I show you how and where to put it and how to put it, and a little more deep dive into that. And like just if you've never used a belt before, that's where you want to start. So for Jackie, she's been lifting for a long time. So I think her question is like, when should I be using it? When like in class, like when is the proper time to do that? So we're going to break it down two things. First one is strength, and then we'll talk about a Metcon. So the first one with strength is we want to use it before we need it. So if you can lift, like when we're warming up, you shouldn't be using a belt for all your warm-up sets. We want to make sure that we can create that pressure on our own. We want to make sure that we're warming up and feeling good and feeling fast without that belt. The belt's just going to be that cherry on top that just makes that lift feel dynamite. So warm up without it, and then you're like, all right, I can lift this X weight without a belt, but man, I really want it because it's going to help a lot for it. Then we want to start probably using that belt the set before, right? So if you're like, oh man, I'm at 150 pounds and I really need that belt, and your set before that is going to be 135, put the belt on for 135 even though you don't need it, just to make sure like it starts feeling good and you start getting comfortable with that belt. And then on that next set, that 150, 155, when you like, oh, I need this, then you can put it on and you can feel comfortable with it and ready to go. So that's where I would start with the strength stuff. And then as you need it. There are times when you just don't use it at all. Hey, I want to work on my midline stability and really focus on my form and technique, then we can do that as well. But if we plan on using the belt, start using it a set before, and then warm up without it. Sometimes it can be a few more before that, but make sure to warm up without it, then add to it. Next one is Metcons. And it's when you need it. Generally, I'll use a belt, like let's say I'm clean and jerking, and I'm gonna use a belt for a weight, anything like 225. I'm gonna wear a belt for that, for strength work, clean and jerks. In a Metcon, I might wear a belt for for a 185 when I'm building up to that 225. If I'm doing like 185, I don't want to use a belt for that. It's 1 or 2 reps and I'm fine. But in a Metcon, for 185, I might throw that belt on for the Metcon, because when you're tired, it can be harder to keep those positions. So that belt can help you get on there. I don't think there's a hard, fast rule for this. It's like if you feel you need it, then wear it. there's a lot of people that wear belts for snatches, and I don't like wearing a belt for snatches. It just doesn't feel quite right. I think you need a little too much um, extension in that bottom position, and it just doesn't help me at all. But other people like it on that. So like it depends where you feel like you need it. And you can also use them in movements that you don't necessarily think you might need them, like a shoulder press. I wear my belt for shoulder presses a lot of times, and that's more back to the strength side. But they help me with my shoulder press when I'm doing it. Really helps me build that pressure in the midline. You also want to think about the flow of the workout. Sometimes you can take it off or put it back on. That's why I'm such a big fan of Velcro belts, especially for us, because you can loosen it up and tighten it as you need to, whereas a leather pin one, you just can't do that. It's not fast. So and also, like, maybe you don't want it fully tight, you just want a little bit. You can do that as well, depending on how you're feeling, and how you're feeling might change throughout that workout. So, the Metcon, it's a little bit more of like, it's you have to figure that out. The strength, it can be a little bit more like a step before is where you want. Yeah, sweet. I hope that helps. Like I said, check out the video in the show notes about how and why we use a belt if you're interested on like what the hell does this belt even do. That'll kind of talk about it a little bit. So that's that. Yeah. Next one. This one's from Jake. This one is progress build motivation. So this one's a little more like those two are like very specific, like knowledge type thing, or like a belt and calluses, like very specific. This one's a little more vague, a little more heady. Is progress builds motivation. And I think what happens is when people start, they have this burst of motivation. Like, oh, I want to start working out and get this and this and this and this. And then, 2 weeks, a month later, all that motivation is gone. And now all we have is the grind of working out every day. And people are like, well, I don't want to do that today. And they lost that motivation, so they're not going to come. And what Jake is saying is, when you start seeing progress, when you start seeing results, that's when motivation truly comes. Motivation isn't something that comes at the beginning. It's something that comes after. When you start seeing results, that's when it gets easy. That's when motivation can start coming in. Like, oh, I did this. Now I want to do that. Oh, I'm so close. I'm getting better. Like my pulling strength is getting so much better. I'm almost there to a pull up. And you're like, oh, I got to keep going so I can get that. Like, that's when motivation comes. When you get started, it's tough. And that's almost like the payment that you have to put in. You have to put in the work in order to get the motivation. Like, it doesn't just happen. When you start seeing results, when you start leveling up, like you start seeing all these little things. Oh man, I have a little more definition in my arm. Ooh, the 55-pound push press didn't feel as heavy this week as it did 3 weeks ago. I'm starting to understand what a snatch looks like, or what it is. Like, I actually remember what it is. You were last in the workout for the first 3 weeks, and now you came up to, you were in the top 5 of the workout for this one time. And then you were, second to last in the other one, but you were getting better. We don't necessarily want to compare, but like there's progress if you're seeing something's changing. That's when motivation comes in. The more consistency that you show over time, the more motivation you'll have to keep going. It's a snowball. They'll just keep going up and up and up over time. Now, life events can get in the way, but generally, you keep getting it. When you see results, you want to keep doing those things. Think about it in anything you've ever been good at. The better you get at it, the more you want to do it. Because it's fun and it's exciting and you're good at it. It's tough when you're struggling with it. But you're the type of person that does hard things. You are the type of person that enjoys the journey, even if that journey is hard, because you know because you know what you're going to get out of that in the end. You're going to grow out of that. If it was easy, there wouldn't be any growth from it. It being hard makes it worthwhile. It being hard brings value to it. It being hard is going to make you a better person. It's going to make you a different person. And that's when motivation can really start helping. So it's okay that you're not motivated when you start. It's okay that it's hard and you don't always want to do it. But we have to build the habits and the consistency so that over time we can start building that motivation. All right, I think that went pretty good. I enjoyed that. That was fun. Hope you guys learned something. Do you have a question for me? Do you have a question for me? We can talk about it. Or what is something you wish you knew before you started? Talk about that a little bit. As always, thank you. I really appreciate everything you guys do for us, listening and being members at the gym. Cheers, guys.